All right, welcome to another episode of Not Investment Advice. We've got the main man himself, Trung Phan, and Bilal Zaidi here today. Unfortunately, Jack can't join us this week, but he should hopefully be back next week. Welcome to
Happy
2023,
New Year,
man. Happy New
Happy
Year. I just said welcome
Year.
to, by the way, like I was introducing 2023 as a guest. You know what I mean?
You're like a club promoter. I'll tell you a funny story. We knew when I used to party in Manila. I used to party in Manila, and early 2010s, you can imagine shit got real. This is like the Trung T fan that people know now. Like, this is like a mature Trung T fan.
The
early
tame
2010s
version, yeah?
was a different animal. But I remember we used to have I went to a party, and in the Philippines, they just want to stretch that party out, right? They go hard in Manila, and they want to keep the New Year's party going. So we went to a party in the second week of the New Year, and New Year's over. I'm like, dude,
wait. New Year's over, but they're still celebrating. Is that what you're saying?
No, the way they do it is like they're so hyped. The mic guy, we were at a club, and all night he just go, "Welcome to the second week of 2012." Like,
that's hilarious.
It's like all night, just like trying to bring that New Year's energy, but it ain't New Year's anymore. But
everyone's on dry Jan by that point, man. What's going on?
Exactly, right? Exactly.
Jesus Christ.
Well, talk us through. What's your resolution?
Resolution? Oh, no, I don't know if I got a resolution. I didn't know you got to spring that on me there, Trung.
I'm springing it on you. Do you have one?
The funny thing, I don't really do resolutions anymore. I do I don't want to make this all semantic, but I generally have like focuses, which is similar, but it's not exactly like, oh, I need to do this one thing or whatever. But honestly, it's similar to what we already spoke about. So that's kind of my perspective on it. Is I don't wait for the new year. I'm just like, obviously there's a renewed focus, but it's more aligning, saying, is what I was doing before the last 3-6 months still kind of what I'm focused on? So that's kind of the same as what I spoke about last episode. What about you? You going big this year, yeah?
No,
is it
no
2023
resolution.
Trung's year?
Well, I'll throw this out. I do have a timed thing, and I told everybody asked me when they asked me to take on a new project or like, do you want to hang out or X, Y, Z? I'm like, listen, my kid's still in school 3 hours a day. Okay, I'm just gonna. We made it this far. I'm just gonna hang with him. I know this is not gonna be here anymore, right? Once he goes to school full time, that part of our lives will be over, and he's gonna be going to school full time in the fall. So me and my wife are literally just looking September 2023, this kid's full-time school. We're going to have 8 hours a day back. And my wife's already like preparing by like, she's taking golf lessons. She's like, I'm going to start, I got to get in this golf game. So she's like, I'm going to take up this activity. I mean, the funny thing about golf, dude, I got to say, I'm not good at golf, but I get it. Like, I go to the driving range, like you hit the ball, and I've never done a full course, which is kind of embarrassing, but I've done like pitch and putt.
I've never done it either, yeah.
Like 3 hours on a pitch and putt, like a small 18-hole course where each hole is like a par 2 or par 3. And you're just like, this is amazing, man.
You can see why people get addicted, right?
Yeah, dude, you're walking outside. Like it's not.
Yeah, you're hanging with the boys or with the missus in this case.
The negative of it is you're taking up all this greenery, but like, it's like a park. I get it. I get the appeal of golfing, man. I totally get it.
You don't want to get canceled so bad by the anti-golf conservation people.
No, but I mean, like, God, it does take up
I've seen, what was that episode?
Ridiculous amount of
who did the podcast on
history.
That? Yeah, Malcolm Gladwell. That was actually a pretty good one. And actually, I don't know if you ever listened to our boy Nick Huber, Sweaty Startup. He was on Creator Lab back in the day, and he talked about how golf courses were used for these crazy, I forgot the technical term, but it was some real estate stuff around tax. And it was quite, they do some shady stuff.
Well, let me add one more thing. One last thing. I love how, your old employers, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, they historically, they hate golf. Like they've talked about it. It's like, we're not golfers. It's like, I don't give a shit about golf. I think somebody asked them at a business, like, do you like this like old school business stuff? It's like, no, I hate golf. And obviously it doesn't matter. They're worth $100 billion. They can do whatever they want. But it's just so funny, the general Silicon Valley vibe of, hey, we're new money, we're coming up. Not speaking about Larry and Sergey, but just in general, like techies.
They're so anti.
Like a lot of them hate on golf, right? Because that's like East Coast old school money. Yeah. But then they'll take up a habit that also spends 8 hours a day. Biking, bro.
Oh,
Biking
yeah.
is the funniest one. I had a buddy. He's like, "Yo, I hate golf. It's so pretentious." He has like a $5,000 bikes and goes on 10-hour bike rides. I'm like, bro, how is this any different?
Same shit. To be fair, biker, I don't really do those long
Oh, yeah,
bikes,
fair
but
enough.
I can
There's,
understand why they're amazing. But no, do you know what thing with Sergey as well? He's such I'm obviously a genius guy, but like kind of a very weird guy. I remember just being in the office and he would just walk through, no shoes on. And then you go into the cafeteria and he's in the middle of the cafeteria just doing stretches. Like if someone's going to drop their soup on him by accident, like walking through, not seeing him. And I'm like, what are you doing, man? Like, it's such a weird, like, I get, it's your company, do what you want to do. But like, there's it feels like you're doing it by purpose to show I'm different. Right. I can just stretch in the middle. It's
big the ultimate energy. Signaling, right? Well, last thing, you had mentioned that Larry Page walked really fast and avoided eye contact because he had stuff to do, right? Was that the thing? Like he walked through the campus?
I don't remember that. I remember talking about Eric Schmidt bringing...
Oh, was it Eric?
Bringing ladies
bringing his
through.
Ladies? Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, that was a different one. But
let's get to the episode. Anyway, sorry, guys.
All right, cool. So what we're talking about today is the AI stuff we're going to keep talking about. Specifically, Trung launched Bearly.ai. I think, was it a few months ago by this point? It was like a soft launch.
Legitimately like 2 months in.
2 months ago. Yeah. All right, so we're going to do a deep dive on that, kind of the idea, the use cases, how it's going so far, how he's looking at growth, all that sort of stuff. But deep stuff, and we'll talk a little bit about the wider kind of implications of ChatGPT, ChatGPT-4 that's coming down the line, some talk about competitors and stuff like that as well.
And predictions for 2023 that we found.
And if we get to it, we'll talk about some tech predictions for the year and the worst ones in history as well. So,
let's run down, let's tease them. Stuff like Steve Ballmer saying the iPhone would never work, but you got to give the man his due. It's better to understand why they make the predictions than just roasting them. And I guess the other thing that Bilal, we chatted about was, kind of this stuff. How do you protect yourself as an employee?
Oh yeah,
that's a good point. As a white collar worker, like how should you be approaching AI? Because I actually got a chance to talk to Rune, the legendary pseudonymous Twitter account, and Ethan Mollick, also a legendary University Penn professor at Wharton, and I wrote an article for Bloomberg. They gave some ideas of what they thought about it. But anyways, Let's get into it.
All right, cool. Yeah, we'll get onto that then. So let's start with Bearly.ai. Yeah. So we've already covered several times on the pod, ChatGPT, OpenAI, what they are. But just for people who haven't even heard that episode, could you just give like the 30 seconds of where we are with OpenAI right now? Because there's a lot of like buzzwords in there. And how does your app relate to that?
Right. So there are a number of organizations, and you mentioned it in our pre-chat, that are building kind of these large language models, text, AI-powered text summaries, and then image generation also is what a lot of people have seen. And I mean, organizations like Google, like we talked about, Google kind of wrote the initial papers on these transformers that create these large language models that have powered what everybody saw with ChatGPT, which is like AI-powered text that can do like financial analysis or create legal documents, spit out cold sales pitches, or help you with your coding. And it's literally just a text prompt, right? It's like you type in, hey, can you give me code to like scrape this website? And it will give you an immediate answer. And again, not to say that this code is 100% correct. So one of the negatives of what we've seen and we discussed in the previous episode is a problem with ChatGPT and a lot of the OpenAI tech stuff that we're seeing is that it sounds so confident even when it's actually not correct, right? And that's actually one of the big predictions for 2023 that I saw was like these organizations have to make a decision around how much leeway do you let ChatGPT run, right? Do you just give it carte blanche where you let it answer and let it sound confident, or do you just block and be very aggressive on what you will give answers to? Because Sam Altman, the former president of Y Combinator and now the CEO of OpenAI, the AI research organization, which is worth about $20 billion, Microsoft, one of its biggest investors, he said on December 10th, so a couple of weeks after ChatGPT came out, and like, remember, we talked about Bilal, you said it was a company of the year in our yearly wrap, right? Like, can you tell listeners why you said it was company of the year?
Yeah, it was probably just recency bias, but the main reason was I think it was the first time in the tech space anyway, for a long time, maybe 5 to 10 years, where something came out and everyone was playing with it, and it was not just playing around like, oh, this is kind of fun, but it felt like enough of a shift that we're like, oh, we haven't seen something like this. We've seen the promise, we've heard the promise, but it actually seems to be delivering in tiny little ways.
Totally.
And I think that was why I gave it to them, because it sounds like the obvious answer, but they beat, other people to it, right? They're not the only AI company in the world,
exactly.
but they are
Google,
one of the leading ones.
As we've discussed, Google is sitting on a massively powerful large language model themselves,
exactly.
But they have much more regulatory and business risk to launch it.
And we should probably just mention that. So I said that in the pre-chat that you just mentioned. So I was talking to a few people from Google about this, and my understanding is, beyond what they've said, there's been a lot of debate. Even publicly, some of those AI people from Google have said it's kind of a bad thing that these guys have launched this so early, because not just for them, but just in general for the space, because there is some valid criticism that it's not really ready for that level of scale. I'm generally in the mindset of like, put it out, let people play around with it, and put the disclaimer there, and normally it moves things forward most of the time. But because some people at a place like Google are seeing like the third, fourth version of this, they're seeing how much more powerful it gets, and essentially putting it out without, really giving too much context around what's coming later, could potentially be used in a bad way. And so,
for sure, it already is, right? There's no question. There's already spam farms using it, and Google itself is actually downranking AI generated text, because you can fingerprint AI text. That's an interesting part of it, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
You can fingerprint it and watermark it, because at the end of the day, the part that I didn't really explain to anybody, or for the listeners that do not know, I know a lot of our listeners do know, is ultimately what these large language models are doing when you query it. Like if I were to ask ChatGPT to write, like, hey, write me the 5 reasons the Industrial Revolution were important. Like the way these things work is they're predicting the next word, and they're predicting it, but they have a lot of data behind what they think the next word will be, because it basically ingested the entire internet, right? So they've seen what the common phrases are ideas that link to each other. So this is probabilistic. So that's the thing about ChatGPT. This is not like these are the rules where it says go to Wikipedia, search the right responses, and then like kind of pump out what already exists. It's like they're doing it based on probability. But this is what Sam Altman wrote, much to what you said, Bilal. Sam Altman wrote this 3 weeks ago. He's the CEO of OpenAI. He said, ChatGPT is incredibly limited, but good enough at some things to create a misleading impression of greatness. It's a mistake to be relying on it for anything important right now. It's a preview of progress. We have lots of work to do on robustness and truthfulness. I think he tweeted that out because of the blowback, though. I think people were so enamored by it. It just took over Twitter and like the tech community for like 2-3 weeks. And obviously, it's a huge win for OpenAI and Microsoft and Sam Altman, right? But it was very clear that there's a lot of criticism, including Elon Musk. Elon is he co-founded this organization, but left because he ended up having a different view on it. He thinks AI is extremely dangerous. And so having said that, there's large language models out there, and at the end of the day, OpenAI is a AI research organization. They have a weird structure where they've capped their. They started out as a nonprofit, but now it is for profit. And the structure is kind of weird, but they said to investors, we're going to cap your upside to 100 times, right? Some people are critical of the structure. They think that it sounds like OpenAI is getting the benefits of a nonprofit, but then also without the scrutiny that might come if it's purely for profit. So there's just want to put that out there.
Is it no longer a nonprofit? Do we know the actual?
Its new structure is that it is a for-profit company, but it's structured in such a weird way that they have some nonprofit benefits, like they get to ingest the internet, they get to ingest images that might provide some legal protection.
Can a private company not do that?
I think they would have much more legal liability.
Resistance.
Around. Like if you're an artist, like a big thing with this movement is a lot of artists are looking at the AI generated art and they're like, you literally trained this on my work and I'm not getting compensated. But that's actually, so predictions wise, when you had pitched for this episode to do AI predictions for next year, we went through our boy Ben Tossel's thread. Ben, we're going to get you on this show, man.
For people, Ben has a great AI newsletter, Ben's Bites. He's doing a great job of rounding it up. He's the founder of MakerPad, and he's definitely going to come on here and probably create a lab as well. So we'll do double up on it. Yeah.
So Ben put out the other day, maybe 2 days ago, he said, what are AI predictions? And I read through the thread.
So is this the one that Ben, someone straight up copied and pasted? Is this the same?
That was another one. But one of the most common ones, they said two of the most common predictions for 2023 in AI was, three. Number one is it's gonna keep blowing up because GPT-4 is going to be released, which is 1,000 times more powerful than GPT-3, which is what ChatGPT is based on. The second prediction is going to be a lot more lawsuits and legal liability, and people, the government and the legal industry is going to have to put structure around what is acceptable in AI, because so much is trained on existing text and existing art. Like, what are the copyright implications? And the third most popular prediction, which is related, is what is a regulatory framework going to be, right? Because it's so important now. So with that context, we can finally talk about Bearly.ai now. So Bearly.ai, not doing anything necessarily groundbreaking compared to like a ChatGPT and underlying models, right? But what me and my co-founder Parham realized, or not necessarily realized, just like I consume a lot of content, right? And a lot of the ChatGPT stuff.
That's an understatement, but
a huge understatement. A lot of the ChatGPT stuff that we see is like, hey, can you generate this blog post for me with a quick prompt, right? Like, give me 10 reasons LeBron James is the greatest player ever, and it will give you that. It'll give you that explanation, right? But I've read through a lot of these generation things, and listen, it's good, and they give you ideas that you might not have thought about, but it's like 80% of the way there. Like we talked about, a lot, not all of it is truthful, but it'll sound very truthful. So the way I looked at AI wasn't like, oh, cool, like it can just write my articles for me now. It's like, no, this literally is going to be an aid for me. So I want to think about what were the tools that OpenAI allowed in terms of reading and writing, because I want to start focus on text initially, that would benefit me. And what it came down to was, if you look at what is offered, OpenAI, it gives access to its language models via API. And I know there's a lot of questions about what it's going to do with the business model. ChatGPT, for example, is free right now, but Sam Altman has said that they're going to charge money for it because it's costing them so much money. I think it's like a couple pennies a query, which compared to like a Google search is like an order of a magnitude higher.
Do you know the estimate of how much it's costing them a month? Someone told me the other day, and I can't remember it. So
I saw when they hit 1 million. Users. It was costing them ended up, if somebody did an average like $1 or $2 million a day. And
that was it. That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And I mean,
so they have a deal with, Microsoft's a big investor. So people are asking, what is the business model for OpenAI? And Sam Altman, when they asked him 2 years ago, was like, what is the business model for OpenAI? He's like, I don't know. I'm just going to build the best language model out there and create an API. And this is what he said. Then we're going to ask the AI what we should do for a business model. Like, he said that like non-ironically.
That's hilarious.
But there a lot of people think that they're going to gate GPT-4, slow rollout, and charge for it, which is fine. But the one thing that I've seen is where people say like they're not going to offer the API, like they're not going to let startups like Bearly.ai build on top of it. I disagree with that. I think the best thing for GPT and OpenAI is they, from the beginning, they're AI research company, right? And they want to allow these APIs out there and build API business like Stripe. They're going to be Stripe for AI, right? Where for our listeners, Stripe obviously is a $80 billion fintech company. They are the API business for payments. But the reason this makes sense for Sam Altman, OpenAI, and Microsoft is they can't predict what people are going to use, right? They just put it on the wild and make people pay for API access.
That's a great point,
And Microsoft benefits hugely from this. It's better for Microsoft to allow that to happen than Microsoft to be like, no, we want to be the majority owner of OpenAI and like we want to keep it closed. But that's not Microsoft's business anymore. They have the cloud business. That is the engine of their company. They want people using the cloud. Guess what uses a lot of cloud resources? AI, right? Yeah. So I think the business model for OpenAI will continue to be and will be this an API first business. They will give access
to AI a specific example of difference here. So the current way cloud computing works, without going into all the details, the leader has been AWS, right?
Yep.
Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, Google also have their own businesses, and there's some other big players. From my understanding, though, well, actually, let me not have a leading question. From your understanding, what is the difference between compute power needed for this sort of stuff versus what the norm is? So for my understanding, like AWS, a lot of what you're using AWS for is literally just old school web hosting. That's one part. But then there's also like a lot of the back end stuff that you're processing, all the stuff, everything you're seeing on the internet that you mostly use, and apps, they're web apps or mobile apps or whatever, and whatever is being done on the server side, a lot of that is being done in the cloud on these services. So, but my understanding is the AI side is a lot more strenuous than just what the norm is right now.
I couldn't walk through the numbers. I know exactly the question. I totally see the question you're asking. Is like, how big of a business opportunity is this? I think it's
and also like, is it just a lot more expensive to run too? Though it sounds like it's way more expensive.
Well, let's just say, let's put it this way. I think as I'm listening to you, that this is the parallel that come to my mind is like, what is obviously the biggest cloud hosting businesses now? It's stuff like Netflix, right? I'd imagine Netflix, the amount of consumption it does for AWS. Who's AWS' biggest customers? I think that would be the kind of question you want to ask, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I imagine Netflix is one of the biggest customers.
How that might change too.
Yeah. So, and it goes to something that you've talked about with Google in the past. It's like, what is Google's business at the end of the day? It's like they want to build services that 1 billion people will use, right? So if you run a cloud company, you're literally searching for, okay, what is a vertical where 1 billion people will be using this, right? It's consumer facing AI could definitely be a 1 billion person type of business, right? And you'd want this feather in your cap, which is why it was such a brilliant investment by Microsoft into OpenAI. And then obviously, like you said, Google has its own stuff. Amazon has a suite of AI powered tools. So no one's really dropping the ball here. It's to your point, it sounds like ChatGPT came out and they just have the mind share, but Google, for regulatory and business reasons, don't want to risk it yet. So again, that's the entire framework for how I thought about OpenAI with my co-founder Parham.
And so Trung, just to be specific though on that, so you were saying you saw all this amazing stuff being developed, but then specifically what you guys said was we need to create something that builds on top of it. So could you just walk through that a little in a bit more
build
detail?
On top of it, because like we're not going to be creating large language models, right? It's like we aren't that part of the stack. It's like the large language model, to call foundational models, like that is where that's like AWS creating its cloud. It's like, we're going to build on top of it. We don't have the resources, the know-how, and the capital to do that bottom layer. That bottom layer has been created. And OpenAI is now allowing people to build on top of it. And there are a lot, right? Like the companies we've talked about in the past, the kind of, Jasper AI is one, right? They're marketing and copy writing focused. They have $1 billion valuation, and they're built on top of OpenAI. So these are the type of companies that can get built now, where a lot of energy is being put in. And listen, we're not trying to build like the next Google, right? It's like our initial instinct right now is like, can you build a product that I would use, right? That me as a writer and an internet creator that I would use every day. We've done that.
And consumer key, because not everyone's writing like you are.
Exactly.
But everyone's reading and taking stuff in.
Everybody's reading. So I'm like, can we create that? And then the next question is like, if we can create a tool. I'm bearing the lead here. It's like the main purpose here is like, I wanted something to quickly summarize articles that I read, and also give me access to all the AI writing tools that OpenAI offers. Right? It's like grammar check, rewording your existing text, giving you ideas for the next couple paragraphs based on something you've already written. Like these are all offered by OpenAI, right? And they've had this for over a year in what was called an OpenAI playground, and you could have played around with it, or GPT playground, and played around with these tools. Like these tools have been here, but again, OpenAI is a research company. Even though ChatGPT was a huge consumer hit, they didn't expect it, and they aren't actually a consumer first company, and nor I don't think they want to be. I think they want to allow the idea of 1,000 flowers to bloom. It's like, here it is, access it. So the main thing then becomes, so let's walk through the logic chain. Okay, there's a powerful AI text model that can really help white knowledge workers, right? White collar workers and knowledge workers. And then there is the question of, okay, can you put, this is a lot of people make a joke. Can you put a GUI on top of it, right? Graphic user interface. That a lot of people say that's a troll. Like I've seen a lot of people look at Bearly. There's like, it's just a GUI on top of OpenAI. But that's such a dumb remark to make, because that's the entire point is you want to build something that people will use. So for us, Bearly.ai is this. It is instant access to all these reading and writing tools from OpenAI. And I'll just do a quick demo here. And the reason we made that is it's through a desktop app. So what it means is this. Let me show you this.
Yeah, so let's pull up the demo. And again, for people who are only listening on Spotify or whatever you listen,
so just if you can
click through the link on YouTube and watch this, or we'll do our best to explain what's going on.
So the way I thought about it is I didn't want another tab in my browser, although you can tab. But the way I work is I work in multiple documents, right? Google Docs, Microsoft Word, email. I have a Notion room. It's like, I just want this tool whenever I need it, right? So the way we did it is a desktop app. And for the listeners, all I'm doing here is hitting Command-Shift-P. And then I have a drop-down menu. And it literally has access to every single OpenAI tool that I would want. And this is the
desktop app, right?
Yeah, this is desktop. So there's grammar correction, summarize, it polishes your text. It gives you expansion on your text. And you put a whole essay that you've written, and then it'll kind of spit out the next like 2 or 3 paragraph ideas for you. So I don't want to, we don't have to click, but it takes a second, right? You just, here, I'll just do this, right? It's like a question thing. It's like, oh, why is the Industrial Revolution so important? Revolution. So this is basically, I mean, this is similar to ChatGPT, but then it just spits it out, right? It's instant. It's instantaneous. And I just wanted this tool no matter where. And so we created that. That's a desktop app. And the other thing we did, we powered it with a Chrome plugin. So you have an article here. And if I want a summary, because I read so much, and the problem with reading is I'll read an article and sorry, this is, my computer's so slow today. Hold on a second. I'll read an article and I don't want to take notes during that article, right? And I don't want to take notes after that article. So note taking is like the worst thing ever. So from the video there, it's just like, you clicked it and it spits out the summary for you.
Yeah.
Again, summary's not perfect, but it's better than me doing nothing, right?
Yeah. Well, I did it like one of the things we're going to talk about later, the bad tech predictions. I was testing it on that, and I still needed to, I mean, your article wasn't even that long, so it was quite easy for me to read through anyway, but there's plenty of times where if there's a long piece, I kind of want to see a quick exec summary, essentially, which is what this does.
Yeah, it frames it for you, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then when I'm reading through, I know kind of what's coming ahead of time, which helps for someone like me.
It's free to use. The way we did is a freemium model is if you hit your daily, they're called tokens, but I think it's like 4,000 tokens is like equal to 3,000 words, like about 75%, right? So you get X amount of words a day. And let's say you just wanted to draft the first draft of an article. It might be 1,000 words. That's free. Go ahead, use it, right? Or let's say that you are a worker in Southeast Asia and you have emails to answer, but maybe your grammar is not 100% spot on, or you want to just a way to answer based, literally just you put an email in, maybe to a Western customer, and I'll give you a first answer, right? That's free. If you're a power user, you'll hit the paywall. And the summary is definitely one of the most used tools that we have, that and first draft generation. But the business model is freemium, so it's free. You get to try it out. You get to try all the new features that we dig through. But then if you are a power user, then it'll cost $20 to $200 a month, right? So $20 a month
clarify,
or $200 a year.
What are you paying for? What are you paying for? What's the freemium part or the premium part?
The premium part is basically the limit for the amount of words you use is like
got it.
It's almost impossible to hit. It's like it's like 30 Moby Dick books. So that's what you're paying for. $20 a month right now, $200 a year. We're probably going to change that pricing because it's still entry, because we're so beta mode in the sense of like we're improving so much because we're getting so much feedback from our users. So that I want to say that's the wedge. But ultimately, why being a desktop app and a Chrome app is really powerful is you can do so many things once you're there. And what we do get asked on security side is like, do you store any of the queries? Like, no, we don't store any queries, right? We store the metadata just for billing. no storing of the queries. The moderation is done on OpenAI side. So sometimes some requests will be rejected. And it's just because for us to build on top of OpenAI, we have to agree to their moderation parameters. But again, this is a wedge, and it's a wedge in the sense of this. We've built an installed desktop app Chrome plugin. There's also a browser access that's for the people that want to use on their phones mostly. And what we can do though is like we can pipe any kind of AI model into Bearly.ai now. So like we have image generation coming. You know, when you see all these.
So you're saying it doesn't have to just be. Is this all from OpenAI basically?
Well, OpenAI
or you
or
can
any
expand.
other. Yeah.
So
for
yeah,
example,
now you've got
Facebook
an interface.
Has an open source AI has an open source AI model. We can access it, right? And in the future, let's say 6 months from now, Google's like, it's game time. We're playing. We're flicking on our own version of OpenAI. We can plug it in if they choose to open source that and have some type of API for pricing. So we've just built, at the end of the day, a platform where we can add these tools. Now the question becomes, is this the right thing to do? Should you just focus and narrow down? Which is a very fair question, right? But I think, as I alluded to earlier, the reason why we built it this way is like, how does Trung Phan use it? How would Trung Phan use it? Because I want to build it for customer one, right? And I'm using it because it's so easy to access. It's not in the way. It's just when I need it. And I think that is ultimately what AI is going to be. I think it's going to be there when you need it. There will be a point, I'm sure, with GPT-5, maybe even GPT-4, we'll find next year, you can replace a lot of people's work, but you got to keep humans in the loop for the truthfulness and robustness. And we can talk more about that, actually, about how you protect yourself as a white-collar worker, the Bloomberg article I wrote. But so those were that was my thinking around it. So just to summarize, I wanted something that could work in your workflow. And that's why we went with a desktop app and the Chrome browser. It's just in my workflow. Yeah. I'm not forcing you into a portal. It's like wherever you work, you can use this. And we have a lot of feedback. And I just want to make this clear. It's like, if that's not for you, totally get it. But I know for a fact there are a lot of people like me which don't want to deal with 30 tabs. And like, this is kind of the solution.
No, I think honestly, for me, even just the Command-Shift-P, right? Like that's the shortcut, right?
The shortcut, yeah. One click away.
Command-Shift-P. And just, I know you can set a custom one if you want to when you're signing up, but like I'm someone who strictly uses desktop apps for like almost everything. Even like I'll get ones for skins where they don't even offer it, and I'll like make a desktop app. Or I've got like on my iPhone, I've got right now ChatGPT as like an app on my homepage, or whatever it's called. And so, yeah, I think I can see that being useful. So just wherever you are, you can press a shortcut and you've got access to it. I think the interesting thing will be, like you said, as more and more stuff becomes available, you figuring out how many of those things you want to integrate to keep some sort of focus versus, and keeping the simplicity of the app, which I think right now is still, in a good way, simple enough to use and it doesn't get too distracting. But if there was like 5 times the amount of options, I would be like, where do I go? Where do I start? So I think that will be interesting to see.
And again, it comes to these questions that we talked about, right? Is what do you do with the new tooling? Is it like, but I think you nailed it. If it's 5 times more, I mean, listen, I think the longer if I was pitching a VC play is like, you just build it as a hub for these different tools. And like, let's say you're a lawyer and that you needed a AI-powered research tool, and that your law firm goes to, Bearly, they have protection for user information, and they can create some type of team backend. You look at this, and let's say you logged on as a lawyer. Well, to your point, is like, can you simplify it for a lawyer? Do they want 30 different tools, or do they want the 5 most lawyer-used kind of powered AI things, right? It's like same with marketing. So there's a world, especially because we get so much feedback. If you could build a community of people and users that are like basically suggesting what these prompts are, even making them, like we definitely have the ability to have a user generate type of prompt. Right now, we'd have to create them, but there'd be a world where they can just do themselves and like maybe offer those up. So you'd have like rankings of the most popular prompts used by lawyers, the most popular prompts used by marketers, the most popular prompts used by financial analysts, right? Like that would be, I think, let's say 6 months from now, you logged on as a financial analyst and it just said you should use these 5 tools, right? But that'd be pretty interesting, right?
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of how I see a lot of these things playing out longer term. Like you said, it's just more specific use cases, because a lot of people, like we've said a lot on the blockchain stuff in the past, the best kind of products, you don't really know necessarily what's going on in the background. You just know your problem and the solution that they've created for you. So like, that's why I think your original focus when you kind of launched it, you talked a lot about consuming and creating, right? Which is what you do. So it's perfect for your alignment with people, what they know you for. It wasn't saying, hey, if you're a mathematician, I'm going to help you with your maths work. If you're an economist, I'm going to help you with this or whatever. So I think that helps just on like the packaging side. And I'd love to get Jack's take when he's back on how he thinks about it too, because I think he's really good at thinking very clearly about like a specific use case and like banging on about it, you know, in a good way. So that'll be interesting to see, like you said, as it evolves. Another thing you mentioned before we start recording was some of the things you've kind of learned and what you'll be doing now going forward as it relates to like the cost of running something like this. So you were talking about how, let's say you go on our podcast, you guys on the back end might be using multiple platforms like OpenAI, Facebook's
so
API.
The beauty of what Parham, my co-founder, did was like, at the end, like, yes, right now it's for Trung as an AI research power tool. And for all the users, you know, thank you so much for giving this a try, giving us the feedback and bearing with us as we perfect the product. Is those are the toolings now, but the vision is because it's already there, right? They're installing people's desktops. They have the Chrome plugin. It's like there's so many use cases you can have for it now, and the use cases on the consumer side, but there's also use cases on the supply side, which means the API access is like there's so many open source models, right? Not saying OpenAI is open source, but I mean there's so many available models. Like Stability Diffusion is an open source model. OpenAI has also have their term, but they have their API available. And if any other company that starts launching their APIs, one of them is going to end up probably being the best for whatever vertical they choose to be in, right? And like, we can access that. And that's kind of the play with Bearly moving forward, is like routing queries and requests to where the best results will be.
Also, who came up with the name, man? What was the story with that?
Oh, it's a group of, so Parham, I worked with him at Kensho. He was the head of infrastructure. It was an AI fintech company acquired by S&P Global. And we just known each other for 6-7 years on and off. And we've always worked on weird like side projects. And I'm gonna give credit to him on this one. But as soon as I saw it, you know, I love a dad joke. I'm like, oh, nice pun, man. Let's roll with it.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Well, the other question, last question I had on it was, I was talking to my friend about the ChatGPT and all the kind of startups that are building on top of it on the OpenAI stuff. And the question that keeps coming up, which you kind of mentioned before, was like this idea of defensibility, essentially. So for the other people who are going to try to create something very similar to what you guys do for another vertical, or they come in and they already have crazy distribution with, let's say, Morning Brew, just because they're your old competitor. I know you guys are friends and stuff as well, but let's say Morning Brew comes along and says, we've got 2 million people on our list and we're going to create a version of this and launch it to them. They just have a massive head start. I know you've obviously already got your own following on Twitter and stuff, but like, how do you think about, is that even something you think about? I'm just curious how you think about it.
No, that's a great question. Well, number one was, I think, let's talk about ChatGPT. So when that dropped, I know a lot of people that were doing stuff like we were doing were a little bit concerned, right? They're like, oh my God, ChatGPT, and based on how much they're giving away for free. So let's just call it $1 million a day that they're doing, or maybe 2 million. These guys are going to do 50 mil a month, 600 mil a year in free marketing for ChatGPT, right? And is that really unusual for customer acquisition? Like Uber's burnt $30 billion, right? So like, and Microsoft is behind OpenAI or supporting them as a big investor. So like, I know a lot of people that are building on top of the OpenAI models are like, oh my God, are these guys just going to wipe us from like the scenes, like, we're just going to offer this for free. But I think something I noted earlier is I think at the end of the day, like OpenAI is an AI research firm. I don't think consumerization is their strong suit. And this is from their own mouths, right? They've said it themselves, like like we didn't think ChatGPT would blow up as much as it did. I mean, the technology itself is 2 years old, like the underlying model. I know they made some changes and tweaked it up a bit, but like this stuff's been around. And I think the key becomes this. I think ChatGPT will start charging, so that free part is going to get taken away a bit. And the kind of the startups that will do really well, like the generational stuff, will be very industry focused. Like if you did a healthcare focused one, you just crush, right? The best example I think out there is GitHub was a Copilot. GitHub's also owned by Microsoft, but they use Copilot, which helps coders code. And I've read somewhere that it means that coders had to write like 50% less code. But
yeah,
like,
it's crazy.
It's crazy, right?
I've seen like people do it in person or like on a computer anyway. It's incredible.
So like that's the startup, right? Those industry focused ones will just absolutely crush it, right?
I think the other one's legal, man, because
legal's a huge one.
Even if they're not always open to the newest stuff, but if you just think how much stuff they're processing.
Reading and writing they do. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
So those opportunities are massive. Those will exist. Those are not threatened very much by ChatGPT, to be honest. Although I've read somewhere that, and I kind of agree with it in a way, is that the GPT-4, the next OpenAI model, which is apparently 1,000 times more powerful, is like if you're building like a vertical business, like you're building healthcare, and you're training that model on ChatGPT, on OpenAI's GPT-3, the next GPT-4 is so good in terms of its power, the parameters it's been using to train it, that even though you specifically trained in one vertical or one industry, the next version is going to be so good that it's going to blow out your specifically trained one, right? So I think I think Sam Altman even said that. But ultimately, having your own models, training your own models, and very specifying them is a powerful place. But then if you're talking about stuff like that the Bearly team is working on, like a GUI on top of OpenAI, I think, it was scary when ChatGPT dropped it. But then at the end of the day, the use cases we have, it actually wasn't crossing over with ChatGPT. It wasn't a lot of just like long form text generation. A lot of stuff we saw was on the other side, like the summarization or rewording grammars. Like there's different toolings. And again, what do you do if an asset or one thing becomes a commodity? So in this case, the commodity is the large language model, right? So what do you do when that's a commodity? You have to have better distribution, or you have to have a better user interface for functionality or simplicity of use, right? So those are the layers that Bearly is playing on. And to your point about let's say that the Brew dropped a tool, right? I frankly think Parham, the coder, my coding co-founder, is an animal. I don't think they're going to be able to match that. But the other part of the equation is the software is so massive. That's the one thing I say to take away from this is like, for this to become a 7-figure business, we need 5,000 customers, paying customers. That's not
crazy.
A lot, right?
That is
like,
not a lot.
Think about that. That's not a lot. And like, even when I talk about it, like, we need 5,000. Like, I can't find 5,000 people in Southeast Asia.
You can do one-on-one,
Eastern Europe that aren't English native, like that. Even just that market, or I can't find 5,000 white-collar professionals that don't want to save themselves from reading and writing like 10s of hours a week.
Yeah, completely.
10s of hours a week. So that's how I'm thinking about it. I think the market's massive.
There's enough for everyone to eat, essentially. Yeah,
exactly.
I agree with that.
Can you target that? And actually, the way I initially thought about it was like, are there 5,000 people exactly like me, as in they're so lazy to manage all these tabs that they just want this solution? There is. There absolutely is. It's my job to find them. The people,
definitely. For the people who are using it, what are people using it mostly for? Do you know? From
summary's huge. Rewording is very big of like existing text. So again, like this is like, as I kind of mentioned, is like they're not looking just for, hey, can you write me my blog, right? It's like, I have existing text. I have existing workflows that need augmentation, right? So if I'm told by my employer that I have to read these 5 articles and like give them a summary, well, we're helping you with that, right? We're saving you literally hours hours and hours a week if that's your job. First draft is another popular one. That's quite similar to ChatGPT, but it's more customizable on our end, I think. And the freeness of ChatGPT, that's going away. People have to understand this. It's not going to be free forever. So you have to find a kind of a app or solution that works in your workflow. So that's how I'd answer that.
That's great. All right. Last thing on this topic, let's talk about how to save your job from ChatGPT. You wrote about it. So let's talk about like the types of jobs that we've both been playing with these tools for a month or two or longer for you probably, because you've been building this in the background. Like just from my perspective, like I've already spoken to people who, let's say SEO, like my world, marketing, right? So lots of people are using it for SEO already. You did mention there Google is already down ranking like straight up auto-generated stuff. I don't exactly understand how that works. You mentioned the fingerprinting, but let's say you use this to create 10 articles that are, long form articles about a particular topic as a first draft, but then you go in with a human, like actually edit it in a way that still saves you 80-90% of your workflow. I spoke to a friend last week who's not a full-on coder, but he's like technical enough, like he's learned a decent amount, and he said he saved a whole day's worth of work using ChatGPT essentially to create code that would help him solve an issue he's had for years, basically, that's been sitting on the side, it sounded like, and he was finally able to just let it fix something that he couldn't figure out. And previously you would go and search on Google and you'd click through to GitHub and you go in a forum and you'd say, oh, well, that sounds about right, but that's not exactly what I need to do. And you'd maybe figure it out, but even that takes a long time. So I think for that sort of use case, it really is helpful as well. And I think the other one, just again from my world, is marketing copy beyond SEO, but just like, let's say Facebook ads or, Google ads, you have to write these like long, they're kind of short, but you write lots of these variations. And this is amazing. Like I know is it Copy.ai was another company that was been around for a little bit of time.
Copy does that really well. I mean, the Copy was probably quite concerned too with ChatGPT when because I saw a lot of response.
Way before, like,
right? Oh, I just canceled my copy because ChatGPT just does it, right? I don't know how many people did that, and I know they've done a great job building that business.
Decent size. I'm pretty sure they're like 10 million plus revenue.
I think they hit 8 figures ARR, based on some stuff I saw on Twitter.
So, based on those examples and others you might have, what do you think people should be thinking about in terms of essentially using this as a tool to help you versus it competing with you?
Right. So Ethan Mollick, who I mentioned, is professor of Wharton, UPenn. Great Twitter follow, by the way. But he's been really on top of kind of the large language models and what he's seen. And he's done research on the topic for like a decade and about automation. So he brought up some very interesting points. Okay, so this is what Ethan said to me, and I communicated this in my Bloomberg article. He's like, you think about where AI can work, and we touched on there's still a ton of errors, right? And the problem with the errors is they sound so confident when they say it. There's a really viral tweet of somebody that asked ChatGPT, "Hey, can like a burrito be used in a medical setting?" They're like, "Yeah, it can because its shape is circular and you can fit it into." So it sounds super confident, right? So the way Ethan said his framing of it is this: he goes, "Okay, how much error tolerance does your industry have, right? If you're a manager of a nuclear power plant, you probably have very low error tolerance, right? You probably don't want to have ChatGPT running loose and making decisions or writing the documentation without humans in the loop there, right? Totally fair." So he's like, error tolerance is what you're using as a way to think about it. In a creative field, like a lot of what I do, let's be honest, it's creative, is even though I'm supposed to be writing, nonfiction stuff about business, but, a lot of interjection of humor and weird analogies, you can accept a lot of error, right? If ChatGPT,
I love that as your description of your work. Right? When your parents ask what you do, you say, "I write pretty serious stuff, but I throw in some jokes and I throw in some weird analogies." That's exactly a perfect description, yeah.
Exactly. So there's a high error. I don't even know which way to go. Low error tolerance sounds low. You can't tolerate a lot of errors, right? I can tolerate a lot of errors. So using ChatGPT, using OpenAI, using Bearly to touch on the OpenAI models, that's totally game. It's like, because I can correct, I'm in the loop, I can make those corrections, right? So I think that's a very important framing. So I think that's where actually healthcare, we talked about it, is like, you want humans in the loop. You want a lot of guardrails, right? So that makes this threat of AI a lot less tangible. I know that people are saying like, I saw one of the predictions from the Ben Tossell thread that we talked about. Is like, medical professionals are gonna be replaced. I'm like, no, man. It's like, you can't. The amount of liability involved is like, can you get good information? Yes, you can. But Professor Ethan pointed something out that's quite interesting. He's like, there's a lot of research that shows when you find out that an AI or it's been only computer recommended, you lose your faith in it, even if it's trust. Correct, right? Even if like there's a study about in medical settings where like the doctors were given statistically correct information, but the doctor's like, no, I'm trusting my gut. Even though, the numbers say they shouldn't do something, because they don't, the human thing, right? The human element, same with HR settings. Like there's a study of worker productivity and like recommendations that management should do. Computers told them to do something. Management implemented it, improved the productivity. But when the employees found out where the recommendation came from, AI, they're just like, no, we're out.
Does this not remind you of being in a relationship, bro? You'd be saying it for 3 years, and then some random friend will be like, "Hey, have you thought about doing this?" And you're like, "What? I'm pretty sure we said this last week."
That happens all the time.
Same
I get you yelled at by my wife. She's like, "Oh, now you're doing it because your freaking 5-friend group chat sent you an article."
Yeah. And the worst is when you think you came up with it yourself. Exactly. Your boy put it in a group chat. You're like, "Oh, I've got this amazing idea for this AI interface that's going to go on top on the desktop app." And your wife's like, "We talked about this 3 months ago." That was from me, motherfucker. Anyway, but yeah. So back to what you're saying. Exactly that's a great filter, though. I didn't think about it.
The error tolerance, like let me. What do you think about that? From a professional?
I think that's a great filter, because it makes you think. Like you said, we're 2023 now. How many people realize how much of flying a plane is done by a computer? Right, like a lot of it is done, but you still got a pilot in there, because first of all, we probably would be scared if there wasn't a human in there. But two, things go wrong, and sometimes you need that human judgment as well. And of course, I'm sure they're doing lots and lots of things as well. I don't know the details of it, but I know that a lot of the work is being done by computers in a lot of cases, in a lot of our jobs. And
which is negative too, though, right? It's like I think your airplane example is so interesting, because there is actually this upcoming generation is so dependent on the autopilot for takeoff and landing that on the edge cases, that is concerning, right?
How to do it. Yeah. You want someone who knows how to drive stick when you're in Europe, even if you're driving, auto
so this
in the
is
US.
A problem, right? This is even though in totality it's safer, if you look at the numbers, we're entering a world where there might be, like, there's actually a very good example of this. It's in the surgical space. There's a tool called a Da Vinci surgical machine. And basically, it's a surgery tool that one doctor and one assistant can use in a surgical setting instead of like 10. You used to have like a dozen people in a surgical setting. But this tool, it's from Intuitive Surgical. It's a crazy machine. But what it's creating is it's creating issue, because do you have surgeons that are maybe 56 years old? Now they're the pros of using this machine. But the problem with the surgical settings that they are using it, and now you don't have, it's difficult for them to hand it off to the next generation if they're in the same room, right? It's like, because what's at risk? So what's ended up happening is this next generation is coming up, like they're learning, but like in like a video game setting. Like they're unable to actually get the hands-on experience, because when you're allowing the machine to take over a lot, like if instead of in a previous surgical setting where you just help prep everything, now everything's kind of being done, or you need a lot less human access. It's known as it's automation paradox.
Okay, no, I think that's a great example. And just to finish from your question before about what I thought about it, I still think though it is going to dig into the number of use cases or the frequency that you might have needed the human, right? So in the medical example, maybe not surgery, because that is a 10 out of 10 complex life on the line sort of thing. Yep. But let's say I've got a rash on my arm. Obviously, that could also be 10 out of 10 scary if it's the wrong thing. But nowadays, we move from I need to go to the NHS provided doctor down the road, wait in line, and the accessibility to that person is super high. It's super high friction. Then we've moved to like a world of telemedicine, where a lot of the time you can just say, I'm going to click this button in my app. They're going to be able to take 5 times more patients in a day because of the ease of, accessibility. And they can look on FaceTime and say, oh, that looks about 95% chance sure, 95% sure it's this. Just take this. We're going to send you a prescription. Now, I think we'll move to a world where something like that could easily be done through, image recognition,
right.
With a, highly trained AI model for medical use cases, where the database and what is the AI has been trained on, all the images of rashes in the world, like whatever. And so I think that's where the AI use case helps take away the frequency I needed to go to a doctor. But it doesn't mean you're not going to have doctors anymore. It just means you're going to help those people
in the loop. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So
let me give you one more frame. Okay. So that was a good frame. The error rate, I really like that. So think about what industry you're in, and even if it's a lower error rate, you just think if it's more creativity involved, it's just going to make you more creative, right? And give you things you never thought about. Because sometimes you read these prompts. Yeah, it's a power boost. You've read they read the entire internet. Like, it's got ideas, right? And that's not necessarily true or correct, but this MF read the entire internet. When people joke that this motherfucker read the entire internet, it read the entire internet. The other one is former Bloomberg opinion columnist Noah Smith, the incredible Substack. So Noah Smith Substack, really good. I checked that out. And Rune, AI researcher, legendary pseudonymous shit poster on Twitter. So that's ROON, Rune. I had a chance to chat with them. I had a chance to chat with Rune. He wrote an article with Noah about, they address this issues, like what is going to happen to knowledge workers and AI. And they came up with something called the sandwich model of work. So they're saying kind of what we've alluded to. AI is not going to replace workers. Humans are going to stay in the loop. AI is going to augment them. And the way they describe it is the sandwich. So humans give AIs a prompt. So like you said, is like, hey, can you look at these 5 X-rays for me, right? And then the AI generates the solutions like, hey, here are 6 problems we might have found from these 5 X-rays. And then you bring the human back into the loop. So it goes human, ask AI, AI gives an answer, and then human chooses one of the options, edits, and adds touches. That's how AI is going to work in their estimation. And this is what they wrote. I'll leave this last bit. They wrote, Smith and Rune said the workflow for any type of generative AI, and gives a couple examples. Here's an example. Lawyers will probably write legal briefs this way, and administrative assistants will use this technique to draft memos and emails. Marketers will have an idea for a campaign, generate copy en masse, and provide finishing touches. Consultants will generate whole PowerPoint decks with coherent narratives based on a short vision, and then provide more detail. Financial analysts will ask for a type of financial model and have an Excel template, and then they will fill in the data or they will edit the data, right? So the sandwich model. So I think these 2 ways of looking as a white-collar worker.
Prompt. So just to clarify, it was
humans
the prompt.
Give prompt.
Yeah.
AI gives menu of options.
And then
humans
you
pick and
it.
edit. So
Beautiful.
Sandwich model.
That's a great way to. That's a great frame.
Exactly.
And again, like based on that, like I think we talked about on this, pod a few episodes ago, and on Creator Lab, I had 2 people on talking about AI stuff as well, and we talked all about like AI assistants, the kind of idea of AI assistants. What you've built is essentially an AI assistant in your browser, right? It's assisting you with
what was
summarizing.
The takeaway? What did you think about it?
Essentially, I just think that idea of like an assistant giving you a power boost, 10xing your productivity, saving you 10 hours of time. That to me is like the idea that is stuck
like
with me.
Not replacing you, right? Don't be scared, right?
Yeah,
Use it.
Exactly. The same way a computer was, right? But this is like way, more leverage. But just the same way, spell check was better than me reading
Exactly.
analog on a piece of paper, right? So that it's the same thing, but just a lot more powerful.
Well, you laugh about this. So the last thing I'll say about the Bloomberg article I wrote was Professor Malik said the AI he's seen, the ChatGPTs and kind of these open AI models he's seen it's like a magic intern with a tendency to lie, but a huge desire to make you happy. So use accordingly.
Yeah, that's a great way to summarize it. All right, so the summary on that, on how to not get replaced, is just essentially use it to your advantage. And I think the main thing for me is just making sure you're playing around with this stuff, because you don't want to just be in the dark. You want to know what's available, and you can just use it for the things that's actually going to help you out. And if you start to see, actually, this is going to replace the stuff I'm doing, then maybe it's a good time to be the person like operating that AI, right? Like, it doesn't mean you're straight up technical person. It just might be someone who knows how to use the software. That is already better than 99% of the population right now. If you're listening to this, you're already way ahead of 99% of the population. Like, do your parents know what ChatGPT is, except if you show them?
There's no chance.
If you can't listen to this, you're already ahead of the curve. Like, you're already playing around with it, which I think is the most important thing. All right, let's quickly wrap up. Trung, unless you had anything else on the AI.
I think we can probably even skip the predictions.
Should we skip the predictions?
We went deep. This is good, man.
We went deep. All right, cool.
Are you happy? Are you satisfied with this conversation?
I think we put out a good hour there. So let's skip that. Maybe we'll bring that up next week or something if anyone wants it. All right. Thanks for going in deep there, Trung. And I'll be back hopefully in New York by the time this comes out. And next week, be back in the normal office. And we'll see you guys next week. And Happy New Year again. I
didn't even tell the spelling of it. It's BARLY.ai.
I think we can link to I think we can link to that one in show notes as well.
Yeah, we'll link to it, man.
Bearly.ai.
Don't worry, we'll be shilling a lot of Bearly this year.
100%. Anyway, congrats on that, man. It's really cool to see you make that in the time we've known each other.
I appreciate the usage,
it's
man.
Sick. Yeah, 100%. All right, man. I'm going to have to run as well. But good to catch up. And we'll see you guys on the next one next week. Cheers.